Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world, wherever you are around the country, the city, the state. Welcome to another episode of the Silk Stocking Sisters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Theresa J, Canada, and we're glad you're here. Today, I have a fantastic guest, a special guest. Like you know, all my guests are special. And we have today Miss Paige Shoemaker DeMio. And I'll give you a little background about her, and then we'll talk about the topics for today. Ms. DeMio is a senior policy analyst for K-12 education policy at American Progress. Prior to joining American Progress, she served as a secondary social studies teacher. Yay! In Cleveland, Ohio. Go Cleveland. Okay, Midwest. As a former educator, she has a passion for developing education policies that will ensure an equitable education system in the United States. In addition to her time in the classroom, she previously interned on Capitol Hill for Senator Sherrod Brown, Democrat of Ohio, and the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, as well as the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce Adult Education Options team. She earned a bachelor's degree in political science and sociology, criminology from Ohio University, and a master's degree from public administration from the Ohio State University. Welcome today, my guest, Ms. Paige Shoemaker DeMio. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here to chat with you, and thank you for the very kind introduction.
Yes. As people know, that most of the things I talk about in the podcast relate to things that happen in the North and Midwest. So we're going to focus in on the four topics. Basically, today's talk is going to be about the four topics that were addressed in the article that I read. That was so fascinating. I said, I got to get them up there, got to get them up there. So that's what I want to talk about today. So first of all, I want you to tell us a lot about what is the focus for the Center for American Progress.
Yeah, so the Center for American Progress is a research and policy think tank. We're located in Washington, D.C., and we cover all sorts of policy issues. We cover the entire spectrum, and we are just really focused on making bold, progressive policies that can better the life for all Americans. So I'm particularly on the K-12 policy team. We are dedicated to creating education policies that will ensure all students have access to a high-quality education, no matter where they live across the country. So that looks like a lot of different things across a very large spectrum of K-12, and there's definitely a lot of work to do right now.
Sounds good. Definitely a lot of work to do and more. So I want to share with the audience the topics that were discussed in the article, and then I'd like for you to talk about the updates that have happened since the article was written. So let me tell the audience basically what the four topics that were referenced in the article. The first one was government intrusion into K-12 instruction and curricula, expansion of private school vouchers, diminished federal oversight of and capacity to support state and local education agencies, and four, federal K-12 funding cuts and restrictions increase states' financial responsibility. So those are the four topics that I read about in the article that I thought would something be helpful for people to know about. And so, the article was titled Public Education Under Threat, Fourth Trump Administration Actions to Watch in the 2025-2026 school year. So we're now halfway through the school year. Okay. So this is a good time to provide some updates on what's actually happening. So can you share some information with us? And as it impacts the North and Midwest. And let me just remind the audience that the article was written in August 26th, 27th, the 27th, right? I know it was late August. It was late August
2025.
Yeah. It was late August. I had saved the article, I had downloaded and saved it. So it was in late August, and I said, figure this is a good time. Let's get some updates, and hopefully I can get you on to talk about what prompted you to talk about these topics, and then where are we now, specifically as it relates to the North and Midwest. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we started writing the article just really recognizing so much happened to K-12 education last year, and from the federal level. So we wanted to just think about as we're going into this next school year, what should schools be prepared for? What should states be prepared for? What should families be prepared for as they're starting the new school year, and what can be expected? Obviously, part of it is to expect the unexpected. We never know what's going to be around the corner, but these four issue areas were the trends that we have seen throughout last year that we expect to continue throughout this year. So thinking about that government intrusion, private school vouchers, diminishing oversight, and federal funding cuts. Those are four top things that were really impacting K-12 education last year, and we expect to continue to impact this year.
Okay. So, now in terms of the government intrusion, now what about the issues of the voucher situation? That's something that's significant.
The vouchers, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So, last summer with the HR1, also known as the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is what, the administration likes to call it. It created a federal voucher program, that states are beginning to opt into now. So this federal voucher program, states get to decide whether they wanna opt in or not. If they do opt in, individuals can donate up to $1,700 a year that would go to organizations that give scholarships to students to go to private school. In return, those individuals will get a 100% tax credit when they file their federal taxes. So, this is a way for the federal government really to jump in and try to expand these private school programs even further, which is interesting as voters across the country have frequently voted against their communities adopting private school voucher programs. But now the federal government has created a system where states can opt in without voter say. Um,
Right. That's a
so,
good point to make. That's a very good point to make. People don't know that. They didn't know that they can vote. Okay. So that's
yeah, there were plenty of states last year who had, the opportunity to vote on private school voucher programs on their ballot, and, in many states, they denied these programs, but now with the federal program, that's kind of overriding that and letting governors decide on their own regardless of what their voters think. So, we have seen such a push from the administration for private school voucher programs, and this is just going to further expand. Right now, an update from where we were last August to now, we're waiting on Treasury regulations about how the program will specifically work. So, states are starting to opt in, specifically looking at like the Midwest, for example. I know Ohio, Indiana, Missouri, Iowa, they've opted in.
okay.
We're talking about North, New Hampshire's opted in. On the other hand, though, Wisconsin has said they do not plan to opt in. They're
Oh,
wanting to
really?
focus on public education. Yes, as
Okay.
of right now, they have, the governor has said in the press that he does not plan to opt in. So we're waiting to see which states are going to opt in, and we're really waiting on those Treasury regulations to better understand how the program will operate. Until then, it's kind of hard to give more guidance on how states should be handling this because we don't even know the details of exactly how it's going to work. So we're waiting on that, but we are starting to see which states are considering opting in and not. Most of them are not much of a surprise. A lot of
Yeah.
the states who are opting in are states who already had state voucher programs as well.
Well, New York hasn't done that. You know that, right?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Because I'm housed in New York State. So we know that. And nor has Connecticut. Okay. So
Yep.
I'm just sharing with the ones that I know about specifically. And New York has not done that, nor has the state of Connecticut.
Correct, yeah, a lot of states haven't made any formal decision yet, they don't have to make a decision yet, so a lot of states haven't announced either way. There are plenty of states that we expect will not opt in, like you're mentioning, but a lot of states haven't said anything yet, which is expected. They don't
Yeah.
have to say anything until,
The last minute.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
The last minute, watching the clock. Okay.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So that's interesting. But my question though is this: think about what you shared in terms of the criteria is going to be. How many families will be able to even participate in that based upon the costs of private schools? Okay, and how many will be eligible to take off for the tax if their earnings is a certain amount of money? they're not going to get a huge cut, in taxes to begin with. So what does that say about the population of people who will be eligible to participate in this as a whole?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've seen so much information from state programs that can point to what we can expect to happen with this federal program. The federal program basically has no limit on income for students who can receive scholarships. I believe it's about 300% of the median income in the area. So it's
That's
basically saying everybody can get the scholarship. But what you're pointing to there is sure everybody can get it, but in most states, if not all, if you look at the average cost of private school versus the amount of money that would be given in the scholarship, they don't match up. They're not close. So, to a family who doesn't have the money to send their student to private school, getting this voucher, I mean, maybe it covers 20% of the tuition. That doesn't make it so
bad.
they suddenly can send their kid to a private school. What it does is it makes it so that the families who are already sending their kid to private
Yes.
school can get a little deduction from their tuition. They
Right.
some
And then
federal
a tax break.
Yes, and a tax break. There are so many state examples that have shown that a lot of the students who take these vouchers are students who were already in private school. They were never in public
Yeah,
school in the
yeah,
first
yeah,
place.
yeah. Good point. That's a point I want you to share with the audience because that's, I'm thinking it's not just me, but I'm just saying if you think about who is it going to favor the most, all right? And unfortunately, the majority of people who, are in public schools, but if they want to choose to go to private school, still it doesn't really help them to be able to attend the private school because all the criteria in terms of the financial doesn't really phase them because many of them, the parents, the income is not high enough to be beneficial to have the quote unquote tax break.
Yeah. And it's not just the financial barrier. I mean, it's also private schools they get to choose who they let in their schools and who stays in their schools. So
Right.
they might let a student in and then they might, suspend them and say they weren't a good match for this school. And that's all the
Right.
information they have to give.
Yeah.
So it's not just the financial barriers, but it's also can you find a school that will serve you, especially
Yes.
if you have a student with disabilities. And
Yes.
private schools don't have to follow federal law for educating students with disabilities. And so a lot of times they just won't. So, you've got the financial barriers, you've got the barriers of will a school even admit your student? And
No
then also,
IEPs.
yeah, yep, no, you're losing your rights under IDEA, the federal law for students with disabilities. And then also if we think about rural communities, those students for the most part don't even have an option.
No.
Even if they
No.
wanted to do this, there's not a private
No.
school near them to
No.
choose to go to.
Right, so they don't even have the option to even select one, so that's part of it too. So, but basically, I want people to understand, and I think what you're doing there at, Center for American Progress is fantastic to keeping the voices out, what's going on, and the kind of research that you guys are doing and investigation. It's excellent. And I think that education right now has been on the chopping board, as we all know. Okay. And I'm concerned because, we still need to have educated people in our society and so forth and so on, even though some people you don't think so, but we do. Okay. So I think about that, like I said, there are certain populations that are always going to have options for private school. That's a given. All right. Now you talk about the diminished federal oversight and to capacity to support state and local education agencies. What have you seen thus far with that movement since you talked about it back in August?
Yeah, this administration made it very clear day one that their goal is to get rid of the Department of Education at the federal level. They've Tr- Trump has signed executive orders saying that the goal is to shut down the agency. Important to note, they do not have the constitutional power to do that. Only Congress does. But because of that, they are trying to limit the Department of Education's role in various other ways, mainly laying off employees at the Department of
Mhm,
Education.
mhm.
Uh, since this administration took office, the department has been reduced by nearly 50%. A lot of that is still tied up in the courts, so we'll see how it all plays out. But
Right.
even while it's tied up in the courts, it's creating chaos, it's creating confusion, it's creating disruptions. So, without adequate staff, the department can't realistically provide the support and services it's meant to give schools. I recently connected with a superintendent who's in North Dakota. He works in a very rural district, and he talked about how this was the first year in the history of this rural education grant that he receives. In the history of it existing, this was the first year that it was late. And he,
Yes.
he didn't know if it was going to come or not, and he has to make staffing decisions based off that. And the time's running out. Eventually, he did get it, but it was extremely late, creates a lot of confusion, a lot of disruption, and unfortunately, there's just a lot of there's no trust anymore. States, districts, they don't know if they can trust that they will actually get the money that was promised to them, or even that, they could get the money and then it could be pulled away from them. So this there are all these delays to getting the supports that they need because there are not enough people at the Department of Education. And then
Yeah.
they're also taking steps to try to move programs from the Department of Education over to Department of Labor. And there's, rumors that they could be moving more programs to other agencies, but this is considering taking programs that are focused on education and moving them to agencies who have no expertise in education.
True.
The end of the day, it's limiting their oversight, it's limiting their capacity, which is vital to making sure that all students have access to a high quality education.
That's the goal, right?
Goal.
That's the goal. Well, I have to say to you, I have to share with you, I used to live in Ohio.
Ah, okay.
I was my first teaching experience was in the suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Ah, very nice.
Yeah, the Northwest Local School District. I'll never forget. That was my first teaching experience, and because when I went to Ohio, I went to Ohio to visit my sister. Next thing you know, I got hired to teach in the class. So that's why I say you never know. But being prepared and having the credentials and everything else, it makes a difference. But I'm just saying, I know the state of Ohio, and I have friends who are from Cleveland, who were also in college with me. So I'm familiar with the state and so forth and so on. And I think in one of my previous episodes, I talked to someone who was part of something was taking place in Cleveland, Shaker Heights
Mhm.
situation, something like that. So, it's a very different perspective when I talk about, I'm a New York-based person, but then it's very different in terms of Ohio. Can you give us a distinction in terms of how you think it may impact states like Ohio as opposed to, say, New York State?
Yeah, I think uh, some of it is hard to say. I think that a big part of all this is if there are funding cuts and if there are delays in funding at the federal level, it's really going to be up to state governments to decide how they want to step in. So that's something that is really going to differ between states. If Ohio doesn't have anybody standing up in the state government to champion education,
Right.
those students aren't going to they're going to lose resources. So if states have to start filling in budget holes, if states have to start making decisions about, if the federal government is no longer funding this after school program, for example, is the state going to step up and do that or not? Uh, I think the question is looking at Ohio's government versus New York's government, what are their priorities? And are they going to prioritize shifting funds around and finding ways to continue these programs that are so important to student achievement?
Well, many budgets are already tight.
Mhm.
They're already tight,
Yeah.
okay? So that says that we probably won't be able to keep special school programs or breakfast programs. And, if you just think about the complexities that goes into the education budgets themselves, that says a lot of things will be closed off for many people. All right. So do you see, okay, because I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to ask, what do you see possibility happening moving forward? If, in fact, these things that you shared about, the focus of, the current threat of education being under threat, what you think will happen?
I think, uh, on one hand, I want to add a little positivity, a little hope into it all too, because I do see. I don't want to get all down doom
This
and
is not
gloom.
Miss Paige Shoemaker DeMio. This is not reality TV.
No, because I think that's something that is important is that it against in all four of these different issues, we have seen people push back and we have seen people fight the administration over all these things, and we have seen wins. Now, What's bad, though, is that even while things are being fought over, even while we're in these court cases, that still causes chaos and disruption and delays while we're waiting for things to get sorted out. So,
Right.
I mean, as we move forward, like if we're looking at the government intrusion into instruction and curricula,
Yeah.
the administration did recently drop their attempt to ban DEIA initiatives in schools, their widespread one. But at the same time, they're continuing to initiate all these investigations into schools with DEI practices. So I think we're going to continue to see all these investigations, which take up a lot of schools' resources and time to go
Yeah.
through all the litigation, which is then taking away resources and time that could be going to students. I think we're going to have a lot to see around private school vouchers and just how this federal program plays out, which states are going to opt in, which states aren't. And also, like, once they do opt in, are any of states who do opt in, are any of them going to learn a lesson? Like, are any of them going to see it a year down and maybe be like, I don't know if I have high hopes for that, but like, it will be informative to see what happens in those states. And then I think, unfortunately, they are going to continue to attempt to dismantle Department of Education. They've made that clear. They're moving forward with transferring programs to different agencies. They've made it clear that they don't care if Congress has appropriated funds or not. They feel like they can just wipe them away, even though they don't have the authority to do that. So I think that we are going to see the administration continue to push on a lot of these things, but I'm also hopeful that we are going to continue to see advocates push back. Um, but at the end of the day, that does still cause a lot of disruption to students and the opportunities that they have.
Do you feel there are certain parts of the country that may be more able to handle it than other parts of the country?
Hmm, that's a good question. I mean, unfortunately, this is all it's impacting the country as a whole, and another part that we haven't talked about is, with the upcoming SNAP and Medicaid cuts, that's going to make state budgets even tighter.
Mhm.
So I think states who have kind of similar to what I was saying earlier, states who have champions for education, who are focused on an influx of funding for education, will be able to handle this a little bit better. But at the end of the day, with tight budgets that are just going to become even tighter, it's going to be hard. And this attack is really across the whole country. It's impacting everybody and
Everyone.
every community.
So it's not just one area is being impacted, another one's not.
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Well, I want to end in an upbeat if we can, we got to find something upbeat to end this discussion. Um, what do you think the role of the Center for American Progress can do to enhance what's happening, to basically make sure that we stay on top of things? Can you provide that?
Yeah, I think we're really focused on balancing the reactive policy with proactive policy.
Okay.
So we do need to fight back against things, especially unconstitutional efforts. Like we need to fight back against that, but we also need to find ways to improve the public education system and recognize the public education system is far from perfect. But the answer is not to abandon it. It is to come together and strengthen the system, provide students, educators with the resources they need to help them meet high expectations. So I think our role is really to try to balance that and try to figure out what can we do to put focus back on actually supporting students and raising student achievement, which includes both instructional strategies, but also whole child practices, making sure students have the resources and the support they need to be ready to learn. And just, yeah, thinking through those policies and trying to shift the thought process to that of like, what can we do that actually will improve student achievement
Yes.
than all of these efforts that are actively harming student achievement?
Great. That's a great way to end this conversation. I like that upbeat momentum we're going towards here the end. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, Mr. Meal, for just being here and sharing this because I think we need to know about this. I don't think enough is spoken about the important significance of education as a grounding point, a foundation. Like so many children now aren't able to read basic stuff like reading And I think that we really have to think about, an educated society. We have to be able to be literate. And that's why I'm saying it's so important that this topic that's come under attack, and how we want to make sure every citizen in this country can be able to read, write, and do arithmetic. Like I grew up, read, write, do arithmetic. Okay. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and information and background, your expertise about what you're doing at the Center for American Progress. And hopefully we can get together again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having us or for having me and helping me uplift this work and these important conversations. And I would love to come back whenever.
Sounds good. Sounds good. And at that, I'd like to say goodbye. Thank you so much. And I just want to say to my audience, thank you for sharing another episode of the Silk Stockings Sisters podcast. And we'll see you next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye now.